Max never imagined his life would involve an alien roommate. Not that he had anything against aliens. He worked as an interspecies cultural liaison on the Ulara space station, after all. But sharing an apartment with someone from another galaxy, that was a new experience. Veltrix was a Zirith, a species from a distant star system, known for their strange rituals and eerie silence. They were a quiet people, preferring to stay in deep stasis for months or even years, only waking up when it was absolutely necessary. Max had gotten used to Veltrix's sleep-like state over the last few months. She hardly ever moved, barely even breathing, just sitting there in her corner of the room, a peaceful statue. It was normal to him. But today, things were different. Max was cleaning the living area, humming a tune to himself, trying to shake off the boring day ahead. He wasn't expecting anything unusual. Then, he accidentally bumped into a strange box-like object on Veltrix's shelf. The artifact, which looked like nothing more than an ancient piece of alien technology, suddenly activated, humming with a low buzz. Max had no idea what it was, but he knew enough not to mess with alien tech, especially not Zirith tech. But it was too late. Before he could step back, a bright light erupted from the box, and then the air around him began to buzz and crackle. Max's heart raced as the room seemed to warp around him. The box flickered, then shut down, and everything fell quiet. Veltrix stirred. Max froze. For a moment, he thought maybe he was seeing things. But no, Veltrix, the alien who had been in a deep, stasis-like sleep for as long as he had known her, was now blinking her large, reflective eyes open. She sat up, looking confused, but awake. Her golden skin shimmered under the soft light of the room. Her delicate features were sharp, yet still elegant. The strange markings on her face, typical for her species, pulsed faintly as if reacting to the disruption. "Max," she said in a soft but surprisingly firm voice, her eyes scanning the room like she had just woken up from a long dream. "What happened?" Max blinked, trying to gather his thoughts. He had always been told that Ziriths woke up slowly, without much awareness or energy. But this was different. Veltrix wasn't groggy. She was alert, very alert. I didn't mean to wake you," Max said, scratching his head nervously. I just bumped into that thing." Veltrix looked down at the artifact, which was now silent, the glow having faded away. She narrowed her eyes, standing up gracefully from her resting spot. "That," she said, "was a stasis disruptor. It should have remained dormant until I was ready to wake up." Max opened his mouth to apologize, but before he could, Veltrix tilted her head and smiled at him, a mischievous glint in her eyes. "You have done it now," she said in a tone that was almost playful. "I am awake. And you, Max, will help me explore the world of humans." Max blinked again. "What?" The alien woman grinned widely, showing her sharp teeth in an almost predatory way. She stood up completely now, stretching her limbs in a way that made Max feel like he had just woken up from a nap himself. It was as if she had spent the last few months cooped up, and was finally free to explore. "Tell me about your world," Veltrix continued, her voice filled with eagerness. "I have never known it, never seen it. Your world is strange to me, but I am ready to learn." Max was taken aback. He had never heard Veltrix speak with such energy before. It was like she was a completely different person than the quiet, almost ghostly figure he had lived with. "Well, Max began, struggling to keep up with her sudden excitement. "Earth is, well, it's a pretty nice place. We have trees and oceans and cities full of people." Veltrix didn't wait for him to finish. "Tell me about humans. Tell me what you do. How do you eat? How do you sleep? How do you?" She was already moving closer to him, her eyes wide with curiosity. Max stepped back a little, unsure how to handle the situation. This wasn't the quiet Veltrix he had lived with. This was someone different. Someone much more energetic and a lot more demanding of his attention. Okay, sure, Max said, still not sure if he was in a dream. We eat food. We sleep at night. Some of us work, others. Relax. Veltrix raised an eyebrow. Relax? You have a word for not working. Max shrugged. Yeah, sometimes we take a break. This was strange. He had lived with Veltrix for a while, but this was not the same. She wasn't just waking up from stasis. She was exploding with questions, ideas, and energy. Max realized that his life, which had been quiet and somewhat predictable, was about to change in ways he couldn't imagine, and he wasn't sure if he was ready for it. The next few hours felt like they dragged on forever. Max had hoped that Veltrix's sudden burst of energy would calm down after a while, but it only seemed to grow stronger. She wouldn't stop asking questions about everything, about Earth, about humans, about anything she could think of. Max, what do you mean by coffee? She asked, standing by the kitchen counter as Max tried to make himself a cup. It's a drink, Max said, eyeing her cautiously. You know, made from beans. You grind them, boil them with water, and it wakes you up. Veltrix blinked. So it is like a mind stimulator, like the ritual fluids from my people. Max chuckled nervously, setting his coffee down. Well, not quite, but it helps keep us awake. Veltrix immediately reached for the coffee pot. I must try it. I need to understand this waking up ritual of yours. She took a sip and immediately made a face. This is strange. It is bitter. Why would you consume this? Max laughed, even though he wasn't sure if it was appropriate. It's an acquired taste. Most people like it after a while. Veltrix stared at the mug for a moment, as if the answer to some great cosmic question could be hidden in it. But then, without warning, she set it down and moved on to the next thing. Max, she said eagerly, her eyes shining. Tell me about your entertainment. You humans must have interesting things to do when you are not working or sleeping. Max had to pause for a moment. He wasn't sure how to explain human hobbies to an alien who had never seen Earth. Well, we watch TV shows, play video games, listen to music, stuff like that. Music? What is this music you speak of? Max sighed. All right, I'll show you. He pulled up a playlist of some classic rock on his holo device. Veltrix leaned in, her large eyes watching the screen with great interest. The moment the music started, her body stiffened. She looked like she was listening to an alien language, trying to decode it. This, she whispered, this is like the call of a great cosmic being. The energy in the sound is powerful. Max smiled, glad to see that something on Earth had captured her attention so fully. But as the song played on, Veltrix started moving to the rhythm, almost instinctively. Her body swayed in ways that seemed completely natural to her. Max couldn't help but laugh. Hey, looks like you've got some moves, he said, grinning. Maybe you should start a dance club or something. Veltrix paused mid-sway and looked at him, her expression as serious as ever. Dance club. Is that where you humans express emotions through movement? I must learn more about this. Before Max could reply, she was already standing up and dragging him to the middle of the room. Come, Max, show me how humans express themselves with movement. Max, caught off guard, awkwardly joined her in the impromptu dance. It was clumsy, and he wasn't much of a dancer, but he was trying to keep up. Veltrix was surprisingly graceful for someone who had just woken up. Her movements were fluid, and her body seemed to absorb the rhythm in ways Max hadn't expected. After a few minutes, he started to feel like maybe this was a good way to break the ice, until Veltrix suddenly stopped. Her expression was thoughtful, as if a question had just clicked in her mind. Max, she said with a serious tone, why do you not feel the full power of this music? You are stiff, like a being of stone. You are not embracing it. Max was confused. What do you mean? I'm dancing, aren't I? Veltrix tilted her head and crossed her arms. Humans listen to music for enjoyment, but you do not truly feel it. Your body is not connected to the sound. Why is this? Max blinked. Not everyone dances like that. Some people just listen. Why? Veltrix asked. Music, this art, it moved your soul. I can feel it. Why do you not? Max paused. I guess it's just how we are. Some people are more into music, others not so much. Everyone has their own way of connecting with things. Veltrix looked at him curiously. Humans are strange, but fascinating. She turned back to the music and began moving again, as if trying to get him to follow her example. Max watched her for a moment, her movements fluid and graceful, her energy contagious. But of course, he couldn't help but wonder what had happened to the quiet, reserved Veltrix he had known, the one who stayed in her corner and hardly spoke. Max chuckled to himself. This was going to be a lot more complicated than he'd imagined. Later that day, as the evening settled over the space station, Max tried to relax with a book, hoping for a break from Veltrix's constant curiosity. But just as he opened the cover, she appeared at his side again, eyes wide and sparkling with excitement. Max, tell me about your planet's food. Do you have anything that is spicy? Max groaned, already realizing that there would be no escaping her curiosity. Spicy, huh? Okay, well, we have peppers. And just like that, Veltrix was already off to the kitchen again, eager to sample whatever food Max could come up with. Max sighed, a mix of frustration and amusement building in him. This might be a lot more than he bargained for, but if one thing was certain, it was that his life with Veltrix would never be boring. The next morning, Max woke up to the smell of something strange in the air. It wasn't quite like any food he'd smelled before. He sat up in bed, rubbing his eyes, trying to shake off the sleep. As he wandered into the kitchen, he saw Veltrix standing in front of the stove, carefully mixing what looked like a bubbling cauldron of ingredients. Veltrix? Max asked, his voice thick with sleep. What are you making? Veltrix turned to him with a bright smile, looking far too pleased with herself. I am experimenting with the concept of spicy, as you humans call it, she said, her eyes shining with excitement. I have learned that humans enjoy foods that bring heat to the body. I must understand it for myself. Max blinked, trying to process her words. You're trying to make something spicy. Veltrix nodded vigorously, then gestured to the array of strange ingredients laid out on the counter. I have gathered all of these peppers. She said the word slowly, like it was an ancient mystery. I will combine them and see if I can replicate the sensation. Max's stomach turned a little. I think it's better if you just start with something simple first. But Veltrix wasn't listening. She was already tossing handfuls of peppers, spices, and various unknown ingredients into the pot. The room was filling with a strange, sharp scent. Max wasn't sure if it was the smell of something amazing or something dangerous. All right, Max said cautiously, but if it gets too spicy, we might need to call the fire extinguisher. Veltrix chuckled. I am not afraid of heat, Max. I will conquer it. Max took a few steps back as the pot began to bubble and hiss. He was not sure whether to laugh or be concerned. The alien's determination to understand everything about humans, especially food, was starting to reach new extremes. As the pot simmered, Veltrix turned to Max, her eyes scanning him for a moment. Tell me, Max, she asked, her voice serious. Is it true that humans often consume large quantities of food without truly appreciating it? You eat for pleasure, yes. Max scratched his head. Yeah. I guess food is about more than just survival for us. We enjoy the taste, the texture, the experience of eating. Veltrix tilted her head, clearly thinking hard. I see. Then this food, this spicy food, is for enjoyment, not survival. Exactly, Max said, trying to make sense of it all. We eat what we like. That's the main thing. Veltrix gave a satisfied nod, as though she had unlocked a new level of understanding. I will make sure this experiment brings both heat and pleasure. Max just hoped she wasn't about to blow up the kitchen. A few minutes later, Veltrix proudly presented the dish she had created, a thick, fiery-looking stew. The red liquid inside shimmered ominously, and Max couldn't help but feel a bead of sweat form on his forehead as the smell hit him. "Here you go, Max," she said, placing a bowl in front of him. "This is my interpretation of spicy." Max stared at the bowl. The stew was glowing faintly. There was no way it could be mild. "Ah, Veltrix, maybe we should try just a tiny bit first." "No," Veltrix said with surprising enthusiasm. "If I am to experience this, I will do so fully. You must try it as well." Max sighed, knowing there was no way out of it. He scooped a spoonful of the fiery liquid into his mouth, bracing himself. The moment the stew hit his tongue, it was like an explosion of heat and flavor, nothing like he had ever tasted before. It was intense. The heat hit him almost immediately, and he could feel his face turning bright red. His eyes watered, and he started to cough, barely able to breathe through the spice. But before he could say anything, Veltrix was already gobbling down her own bowl with a look of complete satisfaction on her face. "This is amazing," she exclaimed, clearly in heaven. "The heat fills my body. I can feel my cells waking up, my senses sharpening. Is this what it feels like to enjoy food?" Max was struggling to keep his composure. "Yeah, sure, but maybe a little less next time. Okay." Veltrix wasn't listening. She was already reaching for more. Max, on the other hand, tried to drink water to cool his burning mouth. It wasn't helping much. He looked at Veltrix, whose face was calm and serene, and shook his head. I think I'm going to need a minute," he said, wiping his forehead. Veltrix paused, finally noticing his discomfort. "Oh, Max, is it too much for you? Perhaps I have overdone it, but it is fascinating. The way the heat takes control of your body, the way it makes you feel alive. It is quite liberating." Max nodded, still trying to breathe. "Maybe a little too liberating," he muttered. Veltrix looked concerned for the first time. "You are not harmed, are you?" No, I'm fine. Just don't make anything like this again, okay?" Max said, still struggling with the heat. Veltrix stared at him for a long moment, her expression thoughtful. Finally, she nodded. "Understood. I will learn to appreciate the heat in moderation." Max was relieved. "Thanks, Veltrix. I'd appreciate that." As the heat slowly faded from his mouth, Max couldn't help but chuckle. He had no idea what kind of adventure he had signed up for by agreeing to share his apartment with an alien. But one thing was for sure. His life would never be boring with Veltrix around. The days that followed Veltrix's spicy food experiment were strangely quiet. After the fiery meal, Max thought Veltrix might have gotten the idea that she needed to tone down her enthusiasm a little. But instead, she seemed to shift her focus to something else entirely. Now, the apartment was filled with a new kind of energy. One morning, Max woke up to find that his living room was completely different. The sofa was rearranged, and in the middle of the room stood a giant screen. Veltrix was sitting in front of it, wearing a pair of strange glasses that Max had never seen before. Veltrix," Max called, rubbing his eyes and stepping into the room. "What's all this?" Veltrix turned to him with a grin. "Max, I have decided to learn how humans interact with this thing you call television. I am going to understand everything about your visual entertainment." Max blinked. "You've already started?" She nodded enthusiastically. "I have spent the past few hours learning about the programs you watch. I watched a few things about your history, but I did not understand much. So I thought I would start with your cartoons." Max couldn't help but chuckle. "Cartoons? Oh boy, you picked the right thing to dive into." Veltrix waved a hand, dismissing his comment. "They are fascinating. The way they show human emotions through bright colors and exaggerated movements. I have so many questions. Max sat down beside her, wondering how this was going to play out. He was starting to think that maybe Veltrix was trying to understand Earth in a more hands-on way than he'd expected. He couldn't say it wasn't interesting. Her curiosity about everything was genuine. "All right, what have you watched so far?" Max asked. Veltrix turned to him, eyes wide with excitement. "I watched one called SpongeBob SquarePants. He is an interesting creature, shaped like a box, and yet so full of life. His voice is high-pitched, and he seems to laugh at everything." Max laughed. "Yeah, he's pretty crazy. But, that's part of the humor. It's all about silliness." Veltrix seemed to be processing this information, nodding slowly. "Silliness. So this is how humans express joy. You exaggerate your emotions in such a way to make others laugh." Max nodded. "Pretty much. It's how we make sense of life sometimes, by laughing at the absurdity of it." Veltrix's eyes lit up with understanding. "Interesting. So your cartoons teach you how to laugh at the world. Fascinating. I must see more." Max decided to let her explore on her own, but after a while, he noticed something. Veltrix wasn't just watching cartoons for fun. She was studying them like they were a textbook. She was pausing, rewinding, and making notes on her tablet, as if trying to figure out the mechanics of humor. After a few hours, Max noticed her looking at him, her expression thoughtful. "Max," she said seriously, "I have been watching your cartoons, and I think I understand now why humans enjoy them so much. You use laughter as a way to cope with the chaos of the universe." Max raised an eyebrow. "That's one way to put it." Veltrix nodded, her eyes wide. "I have learned that when you humans face challenges or confusion, you use humor to make sense of it. You laugh at the absurdity of life to feel better. It is a form of survival." Max blinked, taken aback by her insight. "You really think that's why we laugh?" Veltrix's gaze softened. "Yes, you laugh because the world is unpredictable. You cannot control everything, but you can choose how you respond. And your response is often with laughter, which helps you feel powerful in the face of the unknown." Max sat quietly for a moment, contemplating her words. He had never thought about it like that before. Veltrix had a way of looking at things from an angle no one else would consider. It was almost like she was helping him understand himself better. "That's deep, Veltrix," he said, still processing. "I never thought of humor as a survival skill." Veltrix smiled proudly. "I have learned much today." Max watched her, impressed with how quickly she was adapting to Earth. It was starting to dawn on him that she wasn't just learning about human culture for fun. She was trying to understand Earth in a way that no one had before. Maybe she wasn't just a curious alien. Maybe she was an explorer at heart, looking for meaning in everything she experienced. As the day went on, Veltrix continued to explore Earth's strange entertainment, diving deeper into cartoons and movies. She was picking up more and more about human emotions, behaviors, and how people connected with each other through stories and humor. Max began to realize that, despite the chaos Veltrix sometimes caused, there was something special about her perspective. She was seeing things that humans often overlooked. That evening, as Max was about to head to bed, Veltrix turned to him, her face glowing with excitement. "Max, I have learned so much about your species today, but I have one more question before I retire for the night." Max nodded. "Sure, ask away." Veltrix's voice became soft and serious. "Max, why do humans help each other? I see you do it often, even when it is difficult. What makes you reach out to others when it is not easy?" Max paused, considering the question. It was a simple question, but one he had never really thought about in depth. "Well, I think it's because we realize we're all in this together. We're stronger when we help each other out. It's part of being human." Veltrix looked at him for a long moment, and then a small, thoughtful smile spread across her face. "Humans are truly fascinating," she said softly. I believe I am beginning to understand you. Max smiled back. Glad to hear that. And just like that, the alien who had once been a mystery to him was becoming someone Max could truly call a friend. The next few days passed in a blur of strange, funny, and sometimes bizarre moments. Veltrix's curiosity about Earth seemed to grow with every passing hour, and Max couldn't help but find himself caught up in her excitement. But today felt different. There was something in the air, a sense of anticipation. Max had been walking around the apartment in the morning when he noticed Veltrix carefully examining a small silver object on the table. It looked like some sort of gadget, but Max wasn't sure what it was. "Ah, Veltrix," Max called, walking over to her. "What's that?" Veltrix turned to him with a mischievous smile. "Max, this is a smartphone, right? I have been studying it. I believe I have mastered its function." Max blinked, a little unsure. "Oh, yeah, it's a phone. But it's smarter than just calling people." "Why?" "I have learned that humans use these devices for entertainment," Veltrix explained, her eyes wide with excitement. "I would like to see if I can understand why they are so addictive." Max couldn't help but laugh. "Addictive? You mean like how people scroll through endless videos?" "Yes," Veltrix responded eagerly. "But I do not understand why it is so captivating. It is strange. You humans stare at screens for hours." Max shrugged. "I guess it's just a way to pass time or get distracted. But you can also learn a lot from it. It's like a little window to the world." Veltrix raised an eyebrow. "A window, you say? A window to what?" Max leaned over to explain. "A window to knowledge, entertainment, communication, pretty much everything. You can connect with people, watch things, learn, you name it." Veltrix's eyes sparkled. "This device holds such power. I must understand it completely." Max smiled. "Well, good luck. It's pretty easy once you get the hang of it. Just be careful, though. It's easy to get lost in it." Veltrix nodded seriously, already tapping on the screen. Max walked away, leaving her to explore the new world of social media and videos. But little did he know, he'd soon be in for a surprising turn of events. A few hours later, Max was sitting on the couch when he heard a loud, excited shout from the other room. "Max! Max, come here!" Veltrix's voice rang out. Max rushed to her side. "What is it?" Veltrix was holding up the phone, her face glowing with excitement. "I have watched something remarkable. There is a creature called a cat on this platform, and I believe it is both hilarious and highly intelligent." Max raised an eyebrow. "A cat? You mean the animal?" "Yes, these cats are remarkable," Veltrix exclaimed. "They move so gracefully, yet they seem to have no sense of order. They do things that make no sense, like chase their tails or jump into boxes. It is quite strange. But it is also funny." Max chuckled. "Yeah, cats are pretty strange. People love watching them do random things." Veltrix continued to watch the screen, absolutely fascinated. "I must learn more. I will observe the behavior of these creatures." Max sat down beside her, amused by the way she was engrossed in the videos. "You've definitely found a new obsession. I have never encountered such creatures before," Veltrix said, her eyes glued to the screen. "They are both curious and unpredictable. I find it intriguing. What is it about these cats that humans enjoy so much?" Max thought about it for a moment. "I guess it's because they're unpredictable. You never know what they're going to do next. It's like a game of surprise." Veltrix's eyes lit up. "A game. Yes, I understand now. Humans enjoy the uncertainty, the surprise of what will happen next. These cats are a source of joy through their unpredictability." Max chuckled again. "You're starting to get it, Veltrix." As the day went on, Veltrix seemed more and more absorbed by her new cat videos hobby. Max couldn't help but laugh every time he saw her. She had watched so many clips that now she was even mimicking the cat's actions. She jumped on the couch and tried to curl into a small ball like they did. But of course, she ended up awkwardly sprawled out on the cushions instead. "You're not a cat, Veltrix," Max teased, still grinning. "You don't have the flexibility." Veltrix gave him a mock frown. "I am attempting to understand their behavior fully. I must experience it in its entirety." Max rolled his eyes but smiled. He had no idea how long this phase would last, but he was kind of enjoying it. Seeing Veltrix's innocent curiosity about human things made him appreciate life on Earth in a way he hadn't before. Later that evening, when the apartment was quiet again, Veltrix turned to Max with a serious expression. "Max, I must ask you something important." Max looked up, concerned. "What is it?" "I have watched the videos of these cats for hours," she said, her voice calm but thoughtful. "And I believe I have learned something valuable about your species." Max raised an eyebrow. "What did you learn?" Veltrix sat up straight, her expression serious. "Humans are fascinated by the unpredictable. But they also seek comfort in it. They like to laugh at the unexpected. You find peace in chaos." Max was stunned. "That's an interesting way to put it." Veltrix nodded. "I believe I understand why you enjoy these things. You find joy not in the control of events, but in the laughter that comes from the unexpected. It is a way to make life more enjoyable." Max leaned back, taking in her words. "You know, Veltrix, I never thought of it like that." She smiled. "I am learning, Max. I am learning." And with that, Veltrix went back to watching her cat videos, leaving Max to reflect on her surprising insight into human nature. Max wasn't sure what he had expected when he first agreed to let Veltrix stay with him. He certainly hadn't expected to become her guide into the world of human entertainment, humor, and culture. But as the days turned into weeks, he found himself more and more fascinated by her perspective. She wasn't just learning about Earth. She was seeing it in a way that no human ever could. That morning, Max was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping his coffee, when Veltrix walked in. She had a very serious expression on her face, which was unusual for her. Usually, she was full of energy and curiosity. But today, she seemed different. "Max," Veltrix began, sitting down across from him. "I need to talk to you about something important." Max put his coffee down and gave her his full attention. "What's going on, Veltrix?" Veltrix looked at him thoughtfully. "I have been thinking a lot about Earth and its inhabitants. I have been watching your television shows, your videos, and learning about your history. I see that humans have many strengths, but I also see your weaknesses." Max raised an eyebrow. "Weaknesses? What do you mean?" Veltrix leaned forward slightly, her voice calm but firm. "Humans are capable of great things, but you also make mistakes. You fight wars, destroy your environment, and hurt each other. You sometimes choose to create chaos instead of peace. Why is that, Max? Why do humans let these things happen?" Max stared at her for a moment, unsure of how to respond. It wasn't the first time Veltrix had pointed out the flaws of humanity, but hearing it from her, an alien who was still learning about Earth, made him realize something. She wasn't just observing Earth from the outside. She was starting to question it, just like any human might. "That's a tough question, Veltrix," Max finally said. "Humans don't always make the best decisions. We don't always act the way we should, but we try. We try to fix things, to improve. We learn from our mistakes." Veltrix nodded slowly, processing his words. "I have seen that. I have also seen that humans have the ability to change. You are capable of great compassion, even in the face of great challenges. But I wonder, do you truly understand your potential?" Max paused. "I'm not sure I follow." "Your species has the power to shape the future," Veltrix said, her eyes meeting his. "But I feel like many humans don't see that. You don't realize how much you can accomplish, how much you can change the world if you work together. You're caught up in your daily struggles, your small conflicts, and you forget the bigger picture." Max felt a lump form in his throat. It was a lot to take in. Here was this alien, who had only recently landed on Earth, who didn't even understand all the nuances of human life, telling him that humanity had the power to change. But she wasn't wrong. Every day, people around the world were trying to make things better, whether through small acts of kindness or larger movements for change. "Maybe you're right," Max said quietly. "Maybe we don't always see how much we can do. We're so focused on our problems that we forget about the possibilities." Veltrix's face softened. "That is why I wanted to talk to you. I believe that humans are more than what they appear to be. I have seen your strength, your resilience. I have seen your creativity, your drive to survive. You do not give up easily. Even when the world seems against you, you keep going." Max couldn't help but smile. That's the thing about humans, isn't it? We're stubborn. We might not always get it right, but we keep trying. We don't stop. Veltrix smiled back, her eyes shining with something Max couldn't quite place. "That is what makes you strong, Max. And that is why I believe you will make it through anything. You have the power to change not just your world, but the universe itself. You just need to believe in it." Max sat back in his chair, trying to absorb her words. It felt strange to hear that from her, someone who had only just arrived on Earth and was still learning about it. But Veltrix was right. Humanity did have the potential for great things. It just needed the right push, the right motivation. "Thank you, Veltrix," Max said, feeling the warmth spread through him. "You've given me something to think about." Veltrix stood up, a gleam of satisfaction in her eyes. "Good. Sometimes it takes an outsider's perspective to see things clearly." Max laughed softly. "Yeah, I guess so." But just as Veltrix turned to leave the kitchen, she paused and looked back at him. "Max," she said, her voice almost shy, "there's one more thing I've been thinking about." Max raised an eyebrow. "What is it?" I think I understand human emotions better now. I see that you feel deeply, more than I ever imagined. I see how much you care for each other. It's what makes you so powerful. I think that's why you have so much potential." Max blinked, surprised by her words. "You really think that?" Veltrix nodded. "Yes, Max. I think you are more powerful than you realize." Max watched her for a moment, a smile tugging at his lips. Maybe Earth wasn't as messed up as he sometimes thought. Maybe, just maybe, it was the humans who would save it. He just had to believe in it. "Thanks, Veltrix," he said, feeling a new sense of purpose. "I think you might be onto something." Veltrix smiled and nodded before leaving the kitchen, and Max couldn't help but feel a little lighter. He wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, he was starting to believe that humanity just might be capable of changing it. The days had passed quickly, and Max couldn't believe it. Veltrix was about to leave. It was a strange feeling, knowing that his alien roommate, who had brought so much change and insight into his life, was now preparing to return to her home planet. Max had never thought that he'd form such a bond with someone, or something, so far from his own world. Veltrix had not only become a companion but had also opened his eyes to many things he hadn't seen before. Her curiosity and unique perspective on human life had made him think deeper about his own place in the universe. He sat on the couch that evening, quietly looking out the window. The sky was filled with stars, and Max couldn't help but wonder about the world beyond Earth. He thought about what Veltrix had said. Humans had the power to change the world, but it was up to them to believe in that power. He had spent so much of his life getting caught up in the small details, in the chaos of everyday life. But Veltrix had made him see that there was more to it. There was a bigger picture, a future that could be shaped if people worked together and believed in themselves. It felt strange, yet freeing, to think that way. "Max." Veltrix's voice broke through his thoughts, and he turned to find her standing in the doorway. She had her usual serious yet curious look on her face, but there was something different about her tonight. She seemed almost sad. Max stood up, walking toward her. "What's wrong?" Veltrix hesitated before speaking. I will be leaving soon. My mission is complete. But I have learned so much from you, Max. From your world. From your species. Max smiled softly. I've learned a lot from you, too. You've made me see things differently. You made me realize that we have a lot more potential than we think. Veltrix's eyes gleamed. That is because you do. You humans are stronger than you realize. But you must believe in yourselves. You are capable of great things. Things that no other species can accomplish. I hope you remember that, Max. Max felt a lump in his throat as he nodded. I will. I won't forget. For a moment, there was silence. The weight of Veltrix's words hung in the air between them. It wasn't just a goodbye. It felt like an ending, but also a beginning. Veltrix had helped him see something bigger than himself, something bigger than just Earth. And that was something he would carry with him forever. You've taught me a lot, Veltrix, Max said, his voice soft. You made me see that we're capable of more than we think. Maybe, just maybe, we can change the world. Veltrix stepped forward and placed a hand on his shoulder. I knew you would understand, Max. You're not like the others I've met. You see things differently. You have a bright future ahead of you, and I believe that you, too, will help others see what I have seen. Max looked at her with a mixture of gratitude and sadness. I'll miss you, Veltrix. You've been more than just a roommate. You've been a teacher, a friend. I won't forget you. Veltrix smiled, a rare expression for her. And I will not forget you either, Max. You have shown me that humans are worth knowing, worth believing in. Just as Max thought the moment would end, Veltrix did something unexpected. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small glowing crystal. It shimmered in the light, and Max could feel the energy it radiated. This is for you, Veltrix said, handing it to him. A gift, a reminder of what you can achieve. It is a small piece of my world, something that represents potential. It's a symbol of what I know you are capable of. Max held the crystal in his hand, feeling its warmth. He didn't know exactly what it was or how it worked, but in that moment, he knew it was special. It felt like a token of everything he had learned from Veltrix, and everything he was still learning about himself. Thank you, Max said, his voice full of emotion. I'll keep it always. Veltrix nodded and turned toward the door. It is time for me to go now. But I have no doubt that your species will rise to greatness. You just need to believe. Max watched her walk to the door, and for the first time, he didn't feel sad. There was something hopeful in the air. Veltrix was right. Humans had the power to change the world. They just had to believe in it. As she stepped out into the night, Max stood there for a moment, the glowing crystal in his hand. It was small, but it represented something big. A future full of possibilities, full of hope. Goodbye, Veltrix, Max whispered, looking up at the stars. And thank you. With a deep breath, Max stepped away from the door and sat back on the couch, staring at the crystal in his hand. There was no doubt in his mind. The future was his, and it was up to him, and to humanity, to make the most of it. And as the night went on, Max smiled, knowing that whatever came next, he was ready.